Hi everyone, thanks for coming again. Dan, this week we're working on something new, working with third-party APIs in Laravel, a topic I am quite fond of, I've spoken about a lot. Hi Marion, thanks for coming, and Bernard. Um, and my wife, of course. Hello, Amy. So there's many ways we can integrate with third-party APIs in Laravel, and I've found a method that kind of works well for me, and I want to just share it. I've shared it before. I shared it in an article, and it's never the same. So if I just copy the link here, um, this is a blog post I wrote. No, I didn't want to do that. Okay, so I'll just do it this way. I come to here. Here we go. So this is just a blog post I wrote a while ago, back in end of April. It's not that long. It's 13-minute read. Hey, thanks for joining. And the idea of this blog post was just to explain how I work with third-party APIs, a nice, easy way, kind of a step-by-step integrating with the Ping API, which if you've not used Ping before, is pretty cool. It's great for website down, SSL invalid. It's got a generous free tier. It's pretty good. It's got an API, you can work with it, and it's reliable. Also made by a fellow Laravel community member, so it's always good to support other community members, I find. And this is a tutorial that I wrote on how I would go about integrating with that API. Goes relatively in depth using Sparsy's data transfer object. This was before PHP 8, though, I believe. No, it wasn't. This was using the Sparsy's package, even though we've got PHP 8. And what I'll probably do today, I'll explain it without any sort of packages, but still using data transfer objects. And obviously there at the end, testing it, how it works. So that is how that works. What I'll do, I will share that link in the chat quickly. Feel free to have a look at that in your own time if you want to. Don't feel you have to, because I'm going to cover a lot of that today anyway. So what we've got, the way I see APIs is we've got a few different ways we can integrate with them. We could look at, and we've got two main ways we can do it. We've got kind of inside our application and as a package. They're more kind of their interfaces of how we're going to do this. But we've got two different types of API here. We've got a data API. So these are APIs that are typically just kind of like read from. So Algolia places or any sort of kind of data as a service API. They accept mostly GET requests, the odd POST requests. They don't really do too much. It's more about providing you with data. That's what I'd call a data API. And then we've got an integration API. And this is something where you kind of you're integrating a lot more deep with it. You're their service, their API, it's become part of your workflow for your business. And that's what I'd call an integration API. And that's what I call the two main types there. And what we've got is inside our application, I've got an example API, which is kind of a fun one to play with and not the most standardized. So it'll be quite interesting to walk through how we can get some standardization and how we work with that API. And then there's an integration API, which is something we're going in more depth with. And I've actually got a package which I've already done before with this, but it's a very limited package at the moment. It's only got 1 or 2 endpoints. And what I'll do, I'll walk through how those endpoints are added, and we'll look to add a few more. So that's the plan. We're going to go through building some integrations with APIs. So our first one, I suppose, is going to be this data at work. So to do this, we need plain old Laravel application. And what we're going to do is we're going to create a brand new one from scratch. While that's downloading, I'm going to go to here. We're just going to grab this link, and we are going to visit it. Now, this is a spec. This is the Open API. Oh, sorry, the Swagger specification, and this is the OpenSkills data at work, open data at work stuff. So the idea of this is it's kind of like a community open source project, which led by the University of Chicago, and it's all about skills and job titles and how they're related to each other. It's quite interesting. So what you can do is you can search for jobs, you can search for skills, you can normalize skills, you can get all jobs, a specific job, any related skills to a job, and any related jobs to a job. So it's kind of interesting. So think of this as let's say you're building a application where you wanted people to pop a jobs board, and you want to use a standardized way to pull in skills and job titles. Perfect use case. So what we'll do is we have now got our application. So we will go and create a new project from the existing files. And that is in code sites. Let's just make sure this is all refreshed. And that should just be under test somewhere in here. Somewhere. Are you going to show up? That was definitely test, right? I definitely called it test. We definitely called it test. I'm pretty sure we did. Yeah, we did. It's not showing up. So refresh. Cancel that. Let's try it again. Let's try it again. And it's showing up this time. Perfect. So quickly finish that one. Stick that in a new window. Standard default Laravel is just been installed. Nothing added to it at all. It is just good to go. And what we've got choices here. So I built a package not too long ago on stream, which has been somewhat controversial for some people and useful for others. So if we have a look at that quickly, and it's Laravel Transporter. And it's a futuristic way to send API requests, basically. And the idea was I wanted to be able to build up a request like this, send it, and get the JSON so that I could set defaults within this class and override them where I need to. So, perfect example for this. Get job details or get related skills for job would be a request. And I can, default an ID in there, default it to null if I really want to. But while I'm creating this request, I can then override the job I want to get it for. And it means I don't have to worry about constructing it. So I think we might actually use that package for this specific one, which is covering our data API. We're going to have a selection of requests which we want to work with and how we want to work with them. So I love how GitHub's added these little copy buttons, by the way. They are absolutely fantastic. I want to find a way to add them to my website. And no, I do not want to revert to the composer settings. I want to disable that and go back to PHP 8, please. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so what we're going to do is we're just going to zoom in quickly and we're just going to install that. There we go. We've got that installed. Reach out to me on feel free to reach out to me on Twitter, Marion. I'm always happy to talk to people. Yeah, live stream building apps is always fun. I want to try and Twitter's always good for me. I want to try and get some more guests on my streams. It's great just streaming and kind of doing what I want, but I always find it's a bit more engaging when someone else is joining me because it's less more me just kind of instructing, telling you how things should be done, and more a joint adventure between all of us. And that's what I kind of like. So that has now been installed. So in theory, we should now have a new request, a new command called API request. And that'll be create a new API request with Transporter. So what we're going to do, we're just going to make one, and we'll start one to start with one of these. So let's go for, I don't know, getting all jobs, for example. So PHP artisan, API request. We're going to go more in depth in how we're going to we're going to go more in depth into how we can build it from scratch as well. But this is just an example of how you could do it with Laravel Transporter, because I think it's useful to understand the purpose of Transporter and where and when you shouldn't use it. So we're going to make a new request. We're going to call this jobs, and we're going to call this fetch all jobs. And that's our request. We've now got a request. So if we go into app, transporter, requests, jobs, fetch all jobs. So for transport, that's the main namespace. It's app transporter. Everything gets put in app transporter, and then all your requests live in there. So what you can do, you can start to build, you can override things within there, and it's encapsulated in its own namespace away from your app. That's the main reason behind that. So here's our fetch all jobs. And it's this simple. It starts off, I've already declared strict types for you, so you don't have to worry. Things are already being pulled in. Everything's all set up. We've got a method, we've got a base URL, and we've got a path. Now, somebody's already asked me, how do I set a base URL for all of these? Yeah, so this specific integration, what we're going to do now is we're going to do it with a very simple API, which is get requests. So let's just create a new one in here, and okay, so requests, and we're going to create a new class. We're going to call this data at work request. We're going to extend transporter's request, and that's it. That's where we're going to start. By that one, and then what we're going to do, we're going to make this abstract. Here's an abstract one. And what we want to do on this fetch all jobs, we don't want to extend that one anymore. What we want to do is we want to extend the data at work request so that we can do a lot of these. We can do something like this, a default in here. That when we come over to our API docs, let's click on these jobs. Let's just quickly hit that, and we say, okay, great. So we know that that is our base URL right there. Bang. Grab it, stick it in. That is our base URL. I know they're not secure, but that's what the API is telling me. Be quiet for a minute, please, PHP Storm. I'm trying to explain stuff. So fetch all jobs. This is a get request. And if we've ended that with a slash, so it means that we can do all of these nice and simply as is all jobs. So what we'll do, we want to test this now. So what we can do is let us install pest. But I always find seeing how things work is always useful when you're writing tests. And pest is one of the nicest ways I've actually seen writing tests in a very long time. Recently, I couldn't use pest for a package I was creating, and it got quite frustrating having to use. I've already starred you personally, so stop teasing me. So it was quite nice to come back to pest when I couldn't use it, if you know what I mean. So that is all that. So technically now we can composer run test. No. PHP artisan test, is that going to default to it? Yes, it's defaulting to Pest. So there we go. We've now got Pest ready to rock and roll. So what we'll do is we will create, start going through these tests. So we've got a nice feature test. Here's our example test. Let's delete that. We're going to create a new feature for, I don't know, we'll create a new one. Data at work test. Ooh, what did I do there? Rename data at work, and then we'll just create a new file within there called, let's create a new PHP file, jobs test. Right, so this should be very similar to, not that one. What I'm going to do is delete that one as well. And render bin pest in it. Will that do what I want it to? Create a test. Created an example. There we go, example test. So we don't actually need to do anything, which is great. So let's just delete that again. PHP artisan test, sorry. I'm very used to doing it another way. So no test execute, that's fine. So I'm going to stick to how I would do it usually, and we'll just go in here, the PHP file, and we'll just do data at work test. And what we want to do is something very simple. Zoom in. Make sure we got some real estate available. So it can fetch all requests from the jobs endpoint. So yeah, I'm not covering TDD on this and how you should write tests for third-party APIs. This is how you integrate with APIs. Testing APIs is very different. So what we do is fetch all jobs, build, send. That is all you need to do to get that. So at this point, we'll just do a quick dump on that response. And have we still got a terminal? We're going to open this in our terminal full screen, because I think being able to see it bigger is going to be an advantage here. Free PHP artisan test now. This unit not found. Okay, silly Steve, what have you done? Pest. Test case. Directory unit. Now we'll create another one called feature. Enter there. Again. So we've got a response back already. So here is, your response coming back from the API here. What I'm going to do is drop my face off the screen so we can focus on the code. If I feel you need to see me, unfortunately you'll see me, but don't worry, I won't be on it for too long. So this is giving us, if we scroll all the way to the top, exactly what we'd get if we worked with our HTTP facade in Laravel. So it's exactly the same. It's not changed anything there, other than this is how we want to do it. So at this point, we can do, we want to expect the response to be an instance of response, which is that one. We're expecting the response class to come back. Even if it's failed, we're expecting it. So that's now passing. So let's then look at data is the response. We've now got access to the JSON. So let's just dump on the data itself. This is the information coming back from the API. And we've got links down here, which means we can start to paginate quite nicely. Here are the results that we're getting. So directory assistant operator normalizes a directory assistance operator. Here's its UUID. Here's its parent UUID. 3D animator, 2D pressman, 2-year-old preschool teacher. It's got a very wide variety in there. So it's quite an interesting API. So that's how we'd build the first request. And this is a very basic test so we can see how it works. So the next one, let's have a look at we're going to make an API request called Fetch Job. We're going to do a fetch a job by ID at this point. So what we can do, we can come back to app, come back to transporter, jobs, fetch job here. So again, let's zoom in. And instead of extending that request, we're going to extend the data at work request. We don't need that base URL. And we technically don't need the path. So what we can do, function with, I think it's with query. I think that's how I worked it. I'll have to go double check how I built this up. So I'm pretty sure I can do something with it. Was it with query or with path? Let's go jump through the API a second. So here's how it was built underneath. Here is transporter. It is literally less than 130 lines of code. So we can set the path, get the request, get what the path is with a request. We're building up how we're going to send it. We're doing a lot of different stuff, all wrapped around the pending request, and it's macroable. So you can, much like you can with anything in Laravel, you can extend it however you need to. So data at work request, fetch job. That isn't what we wanted. Technically, we don't need that in there. So we can do a public function set path and make sure I spell function right. I don't know why that's meant to be returning static there. Oh, because we're meant to be returning self. That's fine. Forgot why I did that. So return parent set path. So if we look at the parent set path, this is the request. So what we can do, because we're overriding it, we can just do something very simple. And just do that. Or keep it the same, because it's not going to make much difference. So when we come to test this, we can override this path very quickly. So let's test it. So it and fetch a single job from the job point. Something really simple at this point. So here's a response, and we want to say fetch job. We want to build it. We want to set the path. So let's just, again, simplify that one. Let's drop this down. When we want to set the path we want to set is going to be, let's get this one. Path is going to be jobs that. And so now if I just die and dump on, we see what the response comes back, how it's meant to. So we'll just look at the JSON quickly. The test. Here we go. 4th grade teacher. We're getting that request. Okay, we want to get a different job. We just simply replace that. If we really want to, we could go into fetch jobs. We could do a, public function append path, and we can make our own custom one so that we could have, jobs always there. So if we do protected string path is job instead of set path, we want to append path. That's still going to return static. We're going to pass in a string. It's going to be that path. If we want to append, then we can just say that this path equals this path dot path. Return this. Yeah, you could do validation of stuff around that as well if you really want to, but it means that in our test over here, all we got to do is append path instead. So it's really simple to just get started and run with this really quickly. People are saying that they don't see the point in it, and while I agree for certain situations, I've already integrated with two API endpoints in a very flexible way, and if I really want to, I can fake it just as quickly. All I've got to do is go to transporter request and just tell it to fake, and then that's it. That is it. I'm now in test mode, and that's it. It's all you need to do. Use fake to true. Simple. It's simple. Unfortunately, it doesn't return anything at the minute. I'm going to look at a way I can maybe extend how that is working under the hood. But in general, you can just fake the request so you're not hitting that API endpoint if you feel you need to for any particular reason. Send. So I don't know. If you're doing this as a long-term project, would you have to grab a single job from a list of all jobs so that the UUID exists? No. So let's say we were integrating with this on a deeper level. Let's say how to do this. Okay, so the quickest way to do this is to come back a level, and we're just going to Laravel new project. We're going to use Jetstream. We're going to use Livewire. No, don't care about Teams right now. We're going to build a quick Livewire component to explain how we could work with this. It's not going to be the perfect Livewire component. It's not going to be styled amazingly. This is just all about the API right now. So what we'll do is we will new project from the existing files, and let's just go down to code sites, refresh this in here, and let's just open up project. Let's open that up. That should all be installed. So now if I come to project.test, excellent, we're starting to get somewhere. So in my env, I can say that I want to use file there. That'll do that business. Perfect. npm install and npm dev. Although before I do that, I'm going to tidy up. There's something that really annoys me with the start of this. is that I don't actually need all of these files, you know, do that there. We'll organize our imports. There's the load dash, and we'll stick that in there, and we'll stick that in there, and then we'll just grab that, stick it in at the end if we need it. Means I can now just delete that file. Cleaner. All right, so let's just run that. So there's that a little thing that sometimes bugs me out the way. And what we would do is resources, views, welcome. In our layouts, we've got guest. So we're just going to grab this and we're going to say guest layout there. Perfect. We're just going to do a flex item center, justify center. Stick a nice little container around that, and we're just going to make this white. Perfect. So what we need, we want a livewire component now. So PHP artisan, we're going to make a livewire component, and we're just going to call this test search. Really simple. Not right now. And then we're also going to require I keep doing it. Test transporter. So pull transporter back in on here. We'll ignore that one over there for now. And again, we are going to do a PHP artisan make a request, make an API request. I'm going to fetch a job. But again, this is all the way up here. But in here, we want to do livewire test search. There's our test search in there. There's livewire setup. Here's how I would go a little bit deeper with that integration. So in our app, we load that from disk. Disable that. Make sure we're on PHP 8. And then what I'll do is I'll make sure this is showing something first. So here's livewire test search. Perfect. That is there. And what we'll do is items center, justify center. In the middle, nice and simple. Right, here's our component, what we'll work on. Inside HTTP livewire, we've got this nice little component. And then inside transporter, we've got this job here. So what we're going to do is over here, we're going to copy this data at work request into here. We're going to go, actually, no, we don't need to worry about that, do we? No, we don't. So instead of fetch job, actually, we are going to do jobs autocomplete. Is our autocomplete job. That's what we're going to focus on for this one. Don't know why I keep having to reload this from disk. Quite frustrating. So back to the API docs. We can come over, we can grab that, we can come to autocomplete here. Software, try it out. Publisher, software installer, blah, blah, blah. So we can get jobs. Here is the endpoint here. So here is our base URL. Here is our API path. Don't need any data. What we'll want is with query, but we can worry about that in a little while. Let me going on. Is this I think this is yet again update all packages. I have the odd moment with PHP Storm where it just kind of spazzes out on how things work. Okay, so it's indexing, that's fine. That'll finish in a moment. Ignore most of that now. That's great. We can stop looking at that. We can come to here. So we've got a livewire component and we've got our input here. So what we can do is give with an input type search. I'm going to do an input with a type of search. This is going to be a wire model query. And for now, I'm just going to leave it as that. I'm not going to add too much styling to it. So if that's on there, so that's a default search done. Wire model query. So test search. We know that we need a public string query. It's going to start off empty. Done. So what we can do a public function updated query, which is die and dump on this query. Is that updated query or is that update query? It's almost like Livewire is not being initialized there. Livewire is not defined. Okay, so let's go to our terminal. Definitely all installed. Let's come down to our resources, to our layouts, our guest layout. That'll be why. So here's app, we need Livewire styles and Livewire, everything being pulled in on the guest as well. Wire scripts also, please. So now we can look at this. We can look at the console. Work. So that means that our test search, when we have updated that, should get die and dump. There we go. We are hitting that. We are hitting the Livewire component. Now that we've solved that minor implementation detail. So what we're also going to have is a public function, a results, which is an empty array. We'll also have a Boolean for searching, which is going to default to false. When we've updated the query, we'll say this searching is true. And in here, we can have a nice little if we are searching, display this box underneath, basically. It's very simple. It's not, this isn't a front end lesson. So we can do a for else results as result. If the results are empty, then we can do a nice little no results found. And then we can do a end for else. And in here, we'll just do like a li. Results. Normalized titles, something like that. That may work, it may not. We'll find out. Right, that's not to worry right now. That's still hitting that. That's cool. So what we want to do is when we're updating, we public function mount. When we're mounting, we want to say, okay, so this request is going to be our autocomplete request. We're going to build that request. Done. And when we're updating, we want to say that the response is this request with query and so the query we want to send is going to match this part here, begins with something. Query. And then, usually what we do here, we would check for errors. Then we would say results equals response select to array. We'll just do something like that. The results, so this results like that. So let's just see if this is going to work. Request not found on the component. Property request not found on the component. Public request. It's going to complain. Okay, so we're going to have to do this a horrible way that I hate having to do. And each time we update, we just have to rebuild that request, which is a horrible way to do it. It just means we're going to have to replace that, basically. Build with query. We haven't got, we finally got something back from the API. So at this point, so we're getting that back. Getting errors there. Let's just, at this point, we are going to try and dump on response collection to an array so that we can see what the front end is going to get. So, got an array, normalized job title, back in our UI, we can come over to here and just say normalized job title, done. And back in this code here, we can just ignore that, come back, refresh, start searching. It's slightly delayed because it's not going to be instant. For developer, done. So very simple way that you can, you can integrate with it there, Neil. Sorry, that kind of went a roundabout way to show you what I meant. But if you want to do an integration, it's giving you a lot of different things. Maybe not the most perfect way to do some of this, but that is how you would do that. Maybe Livewire was a bad example for this specific thing. Maybe I'd look at something like my API endpoint to do this. And that's how I'd do it, and that's how I'd integrate with just doing it this way. So I'm going to stop looking at that for a second. We're going to come back to here. We're not worrying about this or that at the moment, or this. We're going to look at, okay, so this is how we did it with Transporter. Now, how do we do it without Transporter? So let's start off by coming over to here, and we will just do a... How would we want to do this? Yeah, no problems there, Neil. So we create a new directory. What I like to do is services. This is my third-party services. We're going to create another new directory for the service name, data at work. Then we create a new service within here. We're going to call this service. It's PHP class, doesn't need to do much. Idea of this is to make it a constructor. And with that, we want to set the base URI. We want to set the timeout. We'll just stick to that to start with. That's what we want to start with. And then we come over to config, come down to services, and we'll say data at work. Then we'd come in and we'd do URI is going to be data at work URI, or this. And we can, do something like a timeout is env data at work timeout. We can default that to 10 seconds. Then we can come and we can say, okay, so now we're going to create a data at work service provider. Now create our service provider, which means in our app config, we want to make sure that we're loading that app providers. So that is providers. Is that not reload from disk? There we go. Data at work service provider. Pass. It's data at work service provider. When we register it, we want to say this app singleton. The abstract is going to be service class, and our concrete, when we kind of want this to be resolved, we want to just pull this out and say, okay, we want to return a new service where the URI, base URI is the config services data at work URI, and the timeout is pretty much the same as above. Services data at work timeout. Now, this is a nice way to do it. There's nothing wrong with doing it this way, by the way. Definitely not saying you shouldn't do it this way. This is a pretty nice way, and we're binding it as a singleton because this service class, it's not stateful at all. The idea is that this isn't stateful. The queries you run will be stateful beyond that. So here's our service here. And so once we've got a service, we can do something like public function jobs. Then we can say return, or sorry, we can do request is HTTP with headers. Set the headers in here, and we go, okay, so by default, we want this to be to have, we want to accept application JSON. There's the start of our request. And what we want to do, we want to start building up the client as well. So we can say, okay, so we can do the timeout. We want that to be seconds. That's fine. What? Oh, hi, Annie. Sorry. Well, my daughter just walked behind me. My wife was trying to tell me, and I didn't realize. So there's this timeout here. So here's the setting out overall timeout for the request. And then what we can do there is what I typically do at this point is say, okay, so the request is actually going to be this, build the request. And I come down to here, I do a private function, build request. That's going to return, this timeout is going to return a pending request. So this should return pending request. At this point, I can just return some sensible defaults because I know I'm going to need it in any other method that I'm doing. So here's the request. I've got my request there now. So if I want to get all jobs, I can say, okay, so request, sorry, response equals request get, where the URL, sorry, is going to be this base URL followed by jobs. Don't need to add any query parameters, and we can say if response failed, if the response failed for any way, we can just throw the response exception to exception. We can zoom in. Sorry, I just realized I've got quite a zoom out view there. So what we're doing is we're building a default request down the bottom for this service. This is how we want to deal with requests in general for this API. We're always going to want application JSON. We want to set the default timeout. Done. There's not many more sensible defaults you can do on this to start with. So then if we failed, we throw that exception there. Otherwise, we've got it back and we can say, okay, so we've got our response. So for each response JSON as response as, okay, we'll do it as item to make it look nicer. We can then come through, we can do something like, okay, so services, data at work. We could probably do something like collections within here. We could create a new one. We could call it like a job collection. And we could say that this extends the support collection. Need to do much more. So we could say a new job collection. And at this point, we can say, okay, for each job, we want to say collection add, and we want to item to start with. We're just going to add that one. And at the end of all of that, we can just say, okay, return our collection. And this is just going to return sub-collection. That's an endpoint done. Now, all we're doing here is we're building up this kind of this base API class here. And we're passing through the base URI and the timeout, which are some sensible defaults that you want on any client. You might not always want a base URI, but you're always going to want a timeout. Then you can set your headers, you can set all of that. That can be config driven, environment driven, however you want that to happen. That bit is, situational. Then we build our request by building up the default request. We then create our response by saying, okay, so here's what I want to actually call. If it failed for any reason, throw a response to exception. That will return a request exception or null. Then we're going to create a new collection. We're going to cycle over all of those and just return that collection. Simple, simple, simple. So to see this in action, test.test. Ooh. Test for test. So we'll come over to our web.php for this. Just nice and easy way to demo this. Our service is going to be the resolved instance of our service class. So now let's just die and dump on service. Oops. There we go. We got 21 items in a collection. Each one is an array that was pulled back from the API. And we can take this a step further. What I'll do is zoom in so you can see that. That is just an array holding lots of cool stuff. So the next step is, okay, so we know what these are going to look like. So we can come over to app, come to services, come to data at work, and then we can, are these DTOs, are they value objects? Does it matter? Let's call them value objects because I've been reading a lot of DDD stuff recently. So these are value objects, and we'll just call this one create a new one, and we'll call this a job title. All this job title needs is a constructor, so we can say public function function construct. Don't need anything in the body, technically, because we're on PHP 8. So if we look at this response, what are we getting back? We got a UUID, a title, some normalized stuff. So we can say, okay, so set this up as a private string UUID, private string. Okay, we're setting public because we want it to be easy to access and we don't want to go through the setters, getters. So we want this to be a title. So job title. Okay. We'll keep it as that for now. That's not important, the naming part. So we can have like the public string normalized title. We could also have a public string parent UUID, which could be null because not all of them are going to have parents, and we'll set that as null by default. So the next step is, okay, so let's refactor this so that this item, each item that we want to add is going to be a new job title where the title is going to be the item title. Next, we want that UUID. So we could say item UUID. Normalized title is the item normalized job title, which we'll grab from there. And then parent UUID, which is again popped over there. We can say item parent UUID, that in there. That's enough. So if we just kind of sort those arguments. So now if we refresh this, we've got a collection full of objects. Ooh, UUID doesn't exist. UUID, UUID. Let's just dump. Oh, I know why. I know why. So at this point, because we've just pulled a whole thing into a collection, we're also getting stuff that we don't want to be included, which is a meta stuff, because it's not following any sort of convention. So if we have an item title, which is the most common thing to have, then we will worry about all of that. Let me just make sure this is formatted nicely, otherwise I will just drive myself crazy. There we go. And then if we refresh that, and there you go, 20 items. We've dropped off that last one. We've got job titles, we've got UUID, title, normalized title, and parent UUID. So that's the next step. But if we really want to go that step further, is we would come to here and we would go, okay, so create a new directory. We'll call this factory, and we're going to create a new class called job title factory. And what this will do, it will have a public static function make, which is going to accept an array of attributes, and it is going to return a job title. So for this, it will basically just kind of do this in effect. Just got a very simple make function, which will just take the attributes and return them. So what we can do up here now is, instead of that, we can say return job title factory, make attributes item. Done, and that has not changed. That's still doing the exact same thing, but we're doing it in a more domain-driven way that that's recommended. You know, you've got a DTO factory, which is for creating your DTO. You know, lots of single-use classes all over the place. That's how I would go about doing this. And then obviously, if you want to add on a new endpoint, you can do something like I don't know, public function job, where the string is a UUID. This is going to return a job title or null, for example. And that is where you'd start again. You'd say request equals this request. And the response is going to be the request get URL. It's going to be this base URL followed by jobs followed by passed in UUID at that point. No query required. Again, do your checks much like you did up here. So I may as well just copy this stuff. So if we failed for any reason, we'll do that. Otherwise, the job title, at this point, we'll just do a quick line dump on the response JSON. Make sure that works as expected. So let's just grab that, for example, the web. The job back, that's working. So what we can do is return if set or not is set. That'll catch a response for 404 in theory. So this should be fine. Just to do a quick return. Job title factory make the attributes of that. That shouldn't return null because that will catch any of those. So now that runs, got a job title. So that's a very basic way we could do it without Laravel Transporter. Yeah, there's benefits to either way, and this is just how I work with data APIs. APIs that I'm just requesting data from and working data from, and it's a good API. It's a good way to integrate with APIs, I find. It's very similar to how I did it on the blog article, but that is how we would go about doing that. So if we come back to here, so the next example is as a package using where we're doing something more of an integration. So this is where we're going to look at button down. So if you haven't used button down before, it is don't just write your newsletter, program your newsletter. So the idea is it's got an API where you can just send your newsletters through the API really easily, build up your subscriber list, and it just works. I have started to build a package for it. Laravel button down email. I did it about 2 months ago. Currently tests are failing because I just pushed up a broken thing, but I'll fix that later. And underneath the hood, we're going to go through it. But currently what you have is, here's your subscriber rules. We're using Laravel's validator to validate requests before sending them to the API. We're integrating deep at this point. We want this to be part of our workflow. So this service subscribers get. Cool. So let's have a look. Let's see what I got on with. So Laravel button down email. As you can see, relatively simple package with a client. Here's our constructor. URL, API key, timeout, retry times, retry milliseconds. We've got null and string set there just in case it's passed through wrong. Then when we're making, we're going to make a new client because this is, you could either create it manually or you could statically make it because why not? It's always nice to have that option because it feels Laravel-y. We can then build a request, much like we just did, where we're setting the token straight away. We're setting what type of token it is. Here's our accept headers. Here's our timeout. We can even go and do something like, I believe there's another method called with user agent, where the user agent string is, we just do Laravel button down email. Something like that, something pretty cool. Then if the retry times, retry milliseconds aren't null, then we will set them. We'll make sure they're cast to int in case there's any issues with passing those. Then we return the request. We go to ping it because they've got a ping endpoint. If it's not successful, we go to say an exception. Then we're just going to return the status code, true or false, a Boolean response. Was it HTTP okay, basically? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to composer require my packages because it'll look nicer. Now this is probably going to have to make me alias it. So we can, that response is only being used for that, I believe, which is that. Let's plot that. And here we can say, okay, so HTTP. Okay. And we will just import with an alias. Why is that zoom? Go away. Status. Yeah, status okay. Aliased it. Nice and simple. So subscribers. When we call subscribers, we're going to call a new subscribers passing through the URL, passing through the currently built request, and then forwarding that through to here. Now this subscribers class will take in a URL. It'll take in a pending request and allow to say, okay, do we want to get all of them? Do we want to say all? Do we want to say get? Do we want to create one? Do we want to find? Do we want to update? Do we want to delete? These are all endpoints available. So it just gives us a really, really nice way. Okay, I need to fix some of this in a little while. So as you can see, our client here is, okay, so here's our subscribers, our unsubscribers. Let's go back to our API. So here's our API, check it out in the schema. I believe that's the right button. Perfect. So subscribers, list all subscribers. This is how we do it. Very simple. Pretty good API documentation. Okay, it might not style-wise be perfect, but it works. What we can also do, emails, list all emails. And the purpose of this will be emails are what you're here for on button down. At the end of the day, creating an email via an API is just like creating one in the interface. It will instantly trigger sending actual emails based on tags and emails type you provide. So it's public, private, premium, promoted. It's got a body, which is a string, exclude tags, metadata, slug, subject. You can build out a really, really quick and easy. In this package that I do is to integrate nicely with button down, so you can send an email through the API. You can, instead of having to use their interface, you can build something a little bit like what Mail Coach does, but all inside your own application. So creating a new one. Email type body, which is a string. It's required. All of these are external URL if it needs to go to a URL. Subject is required. Slug doesn't seem to be required. So let's look at that one. We'll do a new service, a new endpoint on here. So it's going to be very similar to this. So what we probably want to do at this point is some of these are going to be very similar as we go through it. That's implementing a client contract there. It's got a fake. So what else do we want to do? So here's our resources. So let's create a new one for emails. This is going to implement the client contract. Add that. Like that. That currently isn't doing much. It's just a way to kind of combine them. So what we're going to do now is a button down resource. That is going to implement the resource contract, I think. Yep. Yeah. So let's simplify that one. Close some of these down. Resource contract subscribers. So subscribers can query. Very simple. It's a simple trait where you can say where key value URL, add query param, return this. So all of them, we want that to be available. So let's just do it this way. We want to be able to query. Yep. We want to be able to construct all in the very similar way. So there we go. We can do all of that. We'll make this abstract. And then that's it. That's all of them for that part. Nice and simple, button down resource, done. So this subscriber no longer implements that. So it doesn't actually need that anymore, which means we can drop some of that. And instead of implementing that, we can just extend the button down resource. And that will still work exactly the same because it's all just been pushed somewhere else. So let's just move this over to the other two. So unsubscribers, drop that, do some cleanup. And then back to emails for new stuff that we're doing. So we're ready to start with a new endpoint. At this point, so emails, what do we want to do? First one, okay, let's get all of them. So public function get. Eventually that's going to return a collection. So how are we doing this in the other ones? In our get, we're saying, okay, so this request get this URL to string. Very similar. At this point, we can say that if the response failed, so the response an exception. What we're going to do, we're going to replicate that into the other places where it is complaining because it's really annoying. So okay, so if the response failed, do that. Find if the response failed, do that. When we're updating, if the response failed, and then again if the response failed. Subscribers. Now let's just quickly go through unsubscribers. Something that you typically wouldn't care as much about, but it's always need to understand your unsubscribers as well. And that's that. So let's just call up. So we are at this point getting them. We've got our response, and much like we did before, we want to cycle over it. So we can come to our resources, DTO, create a new collection. I didn't create custom collections on this. So collection is a new collection, support collection. And we do a quick for each response JSON as item. This is where we push item into collection. And we return the collection. Return a collection, and then all we do, we just create a helper method of all, which also returns a collection, but this is just proxying to get. It's a nice little proxy class for convenience at this point. So statement has an empty body, I know that. So let's come down to our tests. Client test. Endpoint, blah, blah, ping, doing stuff, create, we're creating some stuff here. It can create a new client, it can hit the ping endpoint. What we're going to do is we're going to come down to here, hub me Laravel button down, those are run test. Okay, so I haven't set that up. Okay, it's complaining about this one because I believe that's being faked at this point. But we can look at that in a second. Setup, client test email config, fake. Yes. Parent setup. At this point, we are faking. So we are fake. Where we're failing is base subscriber client test line 177. So if we come down here, 177, we are hitting the subscribers create. We're expecting create sentence with the attributes as this test email. So it's saying that undefined array key email, some resources subscribers. So that apparently isn't being passed through. An issue for when I'm off stream, I think. We won't worry too much about some of this. It can create a subscriber, lots of subscribery stuff. So it can find an unsubscriber. So we'll create a new one. So best with some real estate. So we'll say public function. It can get a list of emails. Like emails equals client emails should fail. I don't think I've actually hooked it up. Failing at that point, and that seems to be killing it early. So I think we've got fast fail going on. So what I'll do is I'll just turn that off a second. Stop on failure, false. Yep, not found, not found. Blah, blah, blah. Undefined method, perfect. So we just need to create that now. So on our client over here, as we have here, we can just come through and say, okay, public function emails, return that, and return a new emails. That is going to take a URL, say URI from string. The URI is similar to this. Emails, and the request is just build a request and inject that in. That's our emails. Now if we run our test again. Getting a list of subscribers. It can get a list of emails, and it didn't perform any assertions. Great. So we're getting through to it, which is a start. So at this point, client test, let's just bind up on emails. What's it going to give us? And where do we need to go from here? Okay, I'm going to look at what we can do with that one. Here we go. Empty collection. Perfect. I'm expecting that. I have got nothing set up on there. This is actually working with the API, by the way. It isn't faking anything right now. Let's do void. So we can say, okay, it gets a list of emails. Let's just do that. And then, okay, we know that's going to come back. So let's create a new email. How do you want to create a new one? So I'll get, we got all. We know we're going to want to say public function create. At this point, we're going to want an array of attributes. It's going to feel very much like Laravel at this point. If we look at how we did it on subscribers, so you can get some context, put the update, the find, subscriber, validate. So that subscriber is a DTO, and we're validating against the attributes. So all we need to do is create another similar thing for the email. So in our DTO, we can create a new PHP class. We're going to call this email. And for now, we will just do that. Similar to the base subscriber. Implement a subscriber contract, which was needed for this. And we can hydrate, validate. We can grab all of this for now, and we're just going to copy all of this across and just trim it down, make it quicker and easier for us. Yeah, we're just going to keep all of that for this very moment. So let's step through this. So our email, it needs a body, public thing, body. That is required. It requires a type. It's going to default to null. It's going to require some, excluded tags. So public null array excluded tags as null. Actually, I'll probably just default that to an empty array so I can drop all these null options going on in here. Then we'll say external URL, so public string, not required. So again, we will null that one up. External URL, default to null. And we can do something like public array, included tags, empty array. Metadata, object nullable. Not really doing much there, it's not explaining much. So we'll just do a public array, meta, empty, to data. Then what we'll do next is we'll move on to the secondary ID, which is an integer of some description, which again, nullable. That's our secondary ID. We'll default that to null. And then public string, which is our slug. Default that to null. And then we have got a public string subject, which is required. So at this point, the optional parameters provided before required. So this one needs to move up to here, and that'll solve all of those problems. And I can grab all of that. All of that can just go. So when we want to create a new one, we know that we need body. Oops, do that. Subject. Next one is a type. Null. So we'll just do that. Excluded tags. Excluded tags for empty array. External URL is going to be that or null. Included tags can be that or an empty array. Secondary ID is going to be secondary ID or null. Metadata is going to be metadata or empty array. And the slug is, we guessed it, going to be that or null. So now I just need to sort those arguments quickly. That's that done. So validation. We've got body, that's required. And a needs to be a string. We have got email type, which is nullable. But when it is there, it's got to be one of these. It's got to either be public, private, premium, promoted. We've got excluded tags, again, nullable, array. Can't remember if there's an array option in the validator. I generally don't check if things are an array, I check the length. So for this one, I'll just leave. So this one we can do a bit more with because we've got some information. So we can say exclude external URL, sorry, external URL is nullable, but when it is required, it's a string. It's got a max length of 200 and I just search for validation rules. Nope. Validation. None of that. Great. Perfect. Validation. Find the routes, controllers. Where is the validation options? Manually creating them. Not what I want to do. Here we go. So array. Okay, so I can see if it's an array. So we can add that in now. Excluded tags. We also want to try and match some regex, don't we? Do we have like a regex regular expression? Yes, we do. We can do regex. So this might look really ugly. Yeah, I thought it would do, but you know when you want to just like double check because naming things can be hard, right? So show the okay, I am not going to pop that pattern in there. We could probably do something like static URL regex, something like that. Add the constant, and we could do that. But that looks horrible. That's just doing URL validation, which I get. Yeah, it's going to bug me, but we're going to leave it. That's a lot of regex for something that could be done easier. But never mind. Never mind. It's not my API. I'm not going to complain. Okay, so included tags. Again, a nullable array. And metadata. This is an object, technically. But I'm going to do it as an array. Because why did I type object if I knew I was going to do it as an array? Because it's going to be easier. So secondary ID is nullable integer. The rules I got. Between those two numbers, I believe there is a between. I can do like that one there. So between that and that, which is gonna be strange. Between this and that. Quite strange. Why we've got validation between those two specific numbers? Like, okay, we can live with that. So slug. Slug again is nullable. It's got some associated rules, so it's got to be less than or equal to 100 characters. So we can say that the max is going to be 100. Got to be a string. And here is the basic regex. It's great. It's a more simple regex. It's a manageable regex. Done. Let us slug. Yeah, you might be right there, Milovan. And subject is required. So if we pop the subject in there, this is finally another one that is required, and it's just got to be a string. Don't give any other rules around that one. So that is just validating before we even sending to the API, which I really like to be able to do. I like to catch it early before I've even sent that network request. So we're validating there. I think I did that wrong when I said runtime exception personally. This should be an invalid argument exception. Oh. There we go. Failed validation on request. Done. It's just that simple. I mean, I don't know if you can do like a throw validation exception. I can, and I can pass through the validator response. Responses can go through null and error bag. Validation exception with messages. Hey, let's do that. So validation exception with messages. Messages is validator message bag. That's going to be, that's giving us a message bag, get messages, done. Yeah, that's kind of cool. I like that. I like that. Let's copy that over into how we're doing this here. That would look so much nicer. We want to make sure things feel right, not just horrible and icky. So drop carbon, drop those. Here's all of that. We're validating there. We're hydrating there. Here's our constructor. Here's some yucky regex, which we're just copying for now. So when we create it, much like we do on subscribers, we just want to say email validate. So email validate attributes. The attributes. Clean, simple, done. That will fail at that point if it needs to. Next, we move on to getting the request, building, and getting that response. So very similar to that. And again, if the response failed, we're going to get some JSON. Why we did it that way there. So if the response failed, throw to exception. I don't know why that was going on there. So I'll have to have a look. Maybe I will have to redo some of this library to make it a little bit nicer. And then we can just turn email hydrate attributes. It's going to be response JSON. Clean, simple, done. That's got a return type of that hydrate will return an email. So this will also return an email. There we go. We can now create. So if we come back to our test, let's see if we can create. Client test. Let's go down to the bottom here. So we'll write a better test around this in a bit. So let's also go, here's a new test and public function. It can create a new email. Here's our email. So what is required is a body and a subject. Test email from PHP unit. Subject. Test email, done. So now we can say the email is actually now going to be this client emails create. Attributes we want to use are these at the top. that will give us a response back. So at this point, we can just kind of see what that response is. Just run it. We failed up the top over something, but I'm not too worried right now. It can get a list of emails, not a problem. Perfect. Test email type, lots of cool stuff. Then if we run that again, in theory, the one before should now be giving us information. What we're going to do while we're waiting for that, we're going to come to button down email. Make sure I am logged into the right account. Yep, here be me. Logging me in. So here is scheduled emails. I don't have any scheduled to go out. Drafts. Don't have any. Your archives, your subscribers. Yeah, I can see quite a few different things in there. So you can create a new email. You have already sent an email with an identical subject and body. Didn't perform any assertions. We didn't get anything back from that. So on here, let's just end up on emails because I'm expecting this to now come back with a response. Some of these are failing. I'm expecting some failures because I've changed things. Excellent. Oh, we tidied up instead of just dumping. It failed. Randomized. Yeah, I probably would. I'll randomize a subject. We'll dump that. And that was random, and we'll just do random string for 32. Don't know what's going to be unique. Yeah, I'm sorry. I am expecting that to fail, by the way. It is expected at that point. So, detail email, get list of emails. Run it again. Get list of emails. Perfect. Fine, I'll just come back to here. Nothing in drafts. Scheduled, anything, nothing scheduled. Settings, programming, embedding, analytics. Emails written 3. I've written 3 emails all from the API just now. I actually haven't received them yet, I don't think. I might have done on my phone, but that's something I can check quite easily if I'm on the right account. Yes. So if I just quickly flick my screen back on. Oh, no, don't click that button. I can now show you I have received an email, which is what we just sent. Oh, can we see it? Can we see it? Oh, that is what we just sent. Nice and simple. So it works. Issue number 2 of newsletter. Test email from PHP unit. It works. We can send an email. That goes to all my subscribers. I can tag subscribers and say, you know, how do I want to control who these go to? So by doing those included tags, for example, retrieve an existing email, UID string of, and identifying this email. Okay, so let's pull that one back. And on subscribers, we did that as find, I believe. Yep. We'll keep it similar because I like consistency when I'm building packages. Right, this should, in theory, do that. And how we did it before was URL path request this, basically. This is basically what we'd want to do. And I'm noticing I'm starting to do a lot of a similar sort of stuff here. So I can email hydrate, throw an exception, drop in that ID. So technically I can now just come along and go, okay, let's come back to the UI. Closed. Emails. Sent to one subscriber, that's fine. Analytics. There's one. That's giving us that. So the response back from the emails when we're getting a list is not giving us a UUID. Oh, it's creating list response 200. Next previous results, an array of objects, email. So this is what it should be giving us. We should also include an ID. So the ID of the email itself is also going to be needed. Public string ID. We'll set that as null because by default that is going to be null. And we just need to make sure that is moved down. And when we come to here, when we can do this, subscriber stuff out the way, subscribers out the way. You can get a list of emails. ID is coming back null right now. Okay. So when we're getting emails, is it email hydrating? We could do a ID is going to be attributes ID or null, basically, and then sort those arguments again. Validating, not to worry. Let's run that. Is that email subscribers similar? So what I'm seeing here is finding things is similar. Other than that return, creating things is relatively similar. I've got a perfect opportunity to refactor here. So, okay, so here's an ID. Let's grab that bad boy. There we go. So come to client test. It can create a new email. Great, cool. I know I can do that. So dump on that email. Ooh, what am I typing tonight? Test. Quick function it and get an email by UID. UUID. Ooh, British PHP. UID is this. And then the email is going to be this client emails find where the ID is the UID. And we're just going to dump out that email. That should now go get everything forward. We'll come back to that in a second. Subscribers, get a list of emails, magical stuff. So you can get an email by UUID. It's not giving us anything there. It's not giving us anything. Okay, so I'm going to die and dump on it because it looks like the test docs is kind of overriding how it's being displayed, which is understandable, I suppose. I kind of should have expected something like this. And we got our email back. If I just do it without the test docs. Yes, we're getting failures now, as which I expected. Please don't point that out. I'm expecting it to kind of change how I'm returning things. There we go. So that is coming, and we've also got this one which is being dumped out up here as well. So we can get an email. We know we can get an email by UID now. So what we could probably just do here is this assert equals. We are expecting email ID to be the same as the UID. And then we can say, we could probably just do like another assert equals that the other way around. We're expecting UID, and what we actually get is that, and what we are expecting is for the test email body be this. Actual is email body. This should be coming back from the API. That'll do that. We're going to run that. Then up here, we can do a test on creating it. So this should return that email back, which we just created. So there's random. Now we can say this search equals. We are expecting random. And what we're actually getting is email subject. At that point, that's enough to say that's working. Cool. Let's do that again. There's that. Here's us working with emails. We can follow in the API, we can get all, we can create a new one, or we can retrieve. Let me focus that view back in. So I think it's quite easy to work with some APIs. The main focus is obviously you've got to perhaps be a little bit clean with how you do it. So here's a ping, here's that endpoint, here's the subscribers. So what we also want to do is if we're sending anything to endpoint emails, HTTP response. Okay, so this is why we're failing on subscribers. Count one results. I have to look at a nicer way to fake this, I think. So what I'm going to do for now is I'm just going to drop that. Doing lots of stuff. Testing validation exceptions. Given data is invalid, I expected some of these failures to crop up because I'm changing how things are working. Great, so let's scroll through. So it can create a new client. Yeah, we know we can do that. We know it's going to be following the contract. Perfect. It can hit the ping endpoint. It can get a list of subscribers. It can filter the subscribers. It can handle a validation exception. So it expects not a runtime, but a validation exception. It validates creating a subscriber. This expects and fail. Keys fail. It can create a new subscriber. That shouldn't fail validation. Perfect. It can find a subscriber. All right, that is a good start. Let's go see what our tests are doing now. Attempting to read property ID on null. That's fine. So we are failing a little bit. Summary of non-successful tests. It can get a list of subscribers. Failed to ascertain that the actual size 0 matches the expected size 1. That is on the client test line 73. So if we come back up to line 73, this is where we are. Subscribers. At this point, let's just look at subscribers. Empty for some reason. Strange because I should be on there, probably because I've deleted myself at this point. So I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm going to fix this all in the background, but that's how I would work with this API, for example. And that's the two main kinds of API I was talking about. So we've got a data API where we're doing something really light, really basic. We could wrap it in a component quite quickly and just start getting data, through some sort of autocomplete, through some sort of, background job, some batch process. And then we've got the more integrated API where we're digging deep into this API. We're following the API description to the letter. We're building business processes to reflect how we can work with it. And, we're being careful about that integration. We're building something more specific. Is there anything else I could show you or anyone would like to see about working with these right now? Let me just anyone want to know anything about APIs, how we want to work with APIs? Because I could talk all day about APIs. I enjoy APIs. I love working with APIs more than most things. I'm not going to push this up because I need to fix some tests and do some tidy up. Extract a method to send data. Yeah, I'm going to be doing some extraction and refactoring along the way with parts of this. But that package, feel free to come aboard, submit some PRs, button down's great if you want to do it that way. I'm going to have to store what I get from the API. Any tips? Yes, plenty. Trying to think of if I have an example. I do have an example, Neil, but it's behind NDA. But I believe you signed the same one, so I'll DM you about that one, but I'll walk through a process. So I work for a company, and what we do is we do property development finance. And part of the process is, companies sign up, they add their information, they add their company information. I've built a nice little UI. I can show you this part with no problems. So that's a blog. So let me go sign in. Here is my account. I currently work at Square Foot Capital. I can go model a deal if I want to, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to come to my profile and company information. Here we go. Here is an API integration that I've done at work. So I can say that I want to work for, this integrates with company's house. So let's go for my limited company that I run with my wife. Futures Limited. When I click on that, that is dispatching a background job, which will hit the API. It will get the information about the company. It will then store it after validating it And if I refresh now, we've got completely different information about that company. And that's now stored in the background. Done. Yeah, if you've got to be careful with some APIs, certain terms and services working with APIs is that you cannot store their data. So that's how I've done it. I've dispatched a job. That is using inertia, that specific page. And what it does, it hits an API endpoint and it will just dispatch a job with the name that was entered. But so because you're searching, you get that company number. I take that company number and the logged in user's ID. I serialize that. I dispatch the job. When that job is processed, it pulls up that full company information. It then stores that company information and updates a reference for that user. Because with the company's house API, their information is the true source of the true source. Their data is the legally correct data. If it's another third-party API where the data, you're not sure if you can trust the data as much as you could with Companies House in the UK, for example, that is where you look to validate that data. But that specific one, again, is Laravel Companies House Laravel. Again, another API package I built because I use APIs a lot. And this one, again, what this one is doing is very similar. So here's how client, we're building it up in a very similar way. Here's building a request, searching, or we could search for a company because we got very similar. So this is just kind of pushing forward to this search, but prefixing it with the companies, searching for officers. So when we're searching for a company, we do this search on line 99. That would go ahead and do this build request, do all the requests, getting stuff. We'll create a new collection, new search results collection, and we build it back. And the reason we got a search results collection is because we can have different types of search results. So we could have a company result, or we could have an officer result, and that's just a way that API feeds us back this information. All of this, is open source code. It's not private. Come and have a look. Come have a look at how it's built. If you think it can be improved in any way, which it probably can, PR issue, whatever you need, stick it up there. Happy to discuss it. But in general, I've got a lot of repos which are working with APIs. We've got button down email here. We've got Laravel Transporter is about working with APIs. We have got Laravel Postcodes, which is again another API package. Camera's off, darling. And then on this one, this one's a bit more popular. This is just validating postcode and getting information parts from a postcode. Again, something I use at work. I built this 2 years ago. Great package. I love using it. It doesn't need to be kept up to date very often. The API doesn't change much. Another good example. Legal trickery. Yeah, you got to be careful with using API sometimes. In their terms and conditions, you got to make sure that you are not breaking them, because you're found out to be breaking them, legal action and all that stuff. You don't want to go down that route. But that is one way you can do it. There's some more examples. If it's public data, you're pretty much safe to store it, right? Because it's public data. If it's through a service, whether you've got terms and conditions, etc., you always be careful. But on that note, before we get into the legalities of working with APIs, I am going to call it a day. Yeah, pay for access. Yeah, that's fine. Here's something I'm also working on at the minute. I'm trying to think of a nice way to create a macro for the HTTP facade, so I can do something like HTTP. Oh wait, I've written it above. Paginate. Yeah, for each one we're going to kind of get this callback of what page we're on. We're going to get this URL, do some stuff, then push that data into something up here. So maybe we'll have like data as an array up there. Then we're just going to push that up there, and then this part is a conditional that we're passing through, the second conditional. So we're going to pass the response on the page. So basically keep running requests while this fails. And what that allows us to do is we'll be able to go through page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just with one simple block of code instead of having to do all sorts of kind of gymnastics. But I'm working on polishing this, so I can't guarantee this works right now. I've not tested it. It's something I wrote while I think my wife was doing something in the kitchen. I was just sat at my desk thinking of things to do. That is for another time. But thank you very much, everyone, for listening. We've got some more streams coming up soon. I'm not too sure what I'm going to work on Thursday yet. If you've got any ideas, what you'd like to see me stream, shout at me on Twitter. Otherwise, I shall see you Thursday at 7:45 British Summer Time. Take care.